Welcome to Back in the Groove, and if you're new here, my name's Keith, and I'm getting back into vinyl after having my collection in storage for more than 25 years. Now, in this video, I'm going to be looking at the vinyl in my collection from the early 90s, and I think specifically from 1990 to 1993. And the reason I'm doing that is when I was collecting, like many, by the time we got to the end of the 80s, I'd transitioned almost completely to CD. So the albums that I'm going to show you today, ranging from 1990 to 1993, represent, in effect, the newest albums in my collection from me pulling it back out of storage. Now, I have bought a few newer albums since then, but when this came out of storage, these would have been the last albums that I would have bought on vinyl. Now, I'm not going to spend too long talking about each one of them, and I'll apologise up front that I've got a little bit of a cold, so if that affects anything, I do apologise. But first up, we've got Pink Floyd, and this is Momentary Lapse of Reason. Now, this particular copy is slightly unusual in that this is a Bulgarian copy. I seem to recall my parents went on holidays to Bulgaria and brought me this back as a present. It's a really flimsy looking copy. It's almost paper thin, the cover. But according to Discogs, it's a really good pressing. So possibly worth checking that out. And it's, more importantly, quite a cheap option if you want to pick that up on vinyl. Now, next up is Nelson, and this is After the Rain. Now, some of you might have seen this album in a recent haul of mine, and you would think that, so you didn't buy this back in the day. Well, what I found when I bought that album a few weeks ago, didn't realize I already had a copy, so I've now got two copies of this. So I did actually buy this. This is a decent album, very typical of the time, and I'm sure I'm going to talk about this a lot more. We're in that period of sort of melodic hard rock, very Americanized rock, especially for a lot of what I was listening to at the time. And that can be represented further by this. This is Jon Bon Jovi's solo album, Blaze of Glory, from Young Guns 2. And, like many in the early sort of 80s, mid-80s, we became Bon Jovi fans with the first few albums that were very good. And I'm sure, like many, my interest in them faded after the first probably 3-4 albums or so. But there is some decent songs on that album, and it sort of evokes that whole kind of cowboy-y, sort of Dead or Alive kind of vibe from Bon Jovi's album. Now, this is Cold Sweat. This is another of those Americanized hard rock albums. This one features Mark Ferrari on guitar, who was a member of Keel for a period of time. It's not a bad album in itself, but very typical of the time, and very typical, in that vein of American rock, kind of like Winger and bands like that. Same here with Company of Wolves. Nothing particularly memorable to tell you about this. I don't think. I've not listened to this for many, many years. Now, a British album or British band of the time were Little Angels. Little Angels were a 5-piece band headed up by Toby Jepson, and from what I remember of Little Angels is they seem to have a really good sort of PR campaign behind them. I remember them being lots of adverts in various magazines, Kerrang. They seem to have an awful lot of weight from the label behind them, who in this case was Polydor, but I never really felt that they took off, if I'm honest, even though they did have a number of albums, and Toby Jepson is still going to this day. Next up, we've got Yngwie J. Malmsteen, and this one is Eclipse, and this is one of the better periods of Yngwie for me, with Goran Edman on vocals, who's an amazing vocalist. Absolutely love Goran Edman's work, and some good tracks on here, Making Love, Bedroom Eyes, and others like that. Good album. Next up, we've got Queensryche and Empire. This was the album that came out after Operation Mindcrime, I think. This has got Jet Steady Woman on, Empire. I really like this album, actually. Odd tracks like Della Brown and things like that. I really think they were experimenting a little bit more with the style, and I really like the album. Next up, we've got Alice in Chains, Facelift. This was a really popular album and quite a valuable album from the time. As is the case with a number of these kind of 90s albums, because they're so late in that period where vinyl was phasing out and everybody was buying CDs, so there weren't many vinyl pressings bought at the time, so the prices all seem to have gone through the roof, and that one's worth about £200, I think. Now, next up, I've got one of my all-time favourite bands, King's X. Absolutely love King's X, love Doug Pinnock on vocals, and this is Faith, Hope, Love, which was a really good album, and it's got the single on It's Love, I'll Never Get Tired of You. There's just lots of great songs on this album. Next one is another of those, I think, at least, Americanized, hard rock albums. This is Harlem. Can't say I recall anything much about this album or this band, if I'm honest. And it looks like they were female fronted, and I've got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of female fronted bands, but I could be wrong about that particular album. I just don't recall much about it at all. Next up, we've got Dio, Lock Up the Wolves, which is a good album. I think is this the one where they got the young guy in on, Ron Robertson, wasn't it? So he came in, I think it was on this album that he came in, young lad, a young British lad. He might have even, not sure he was Irish, I'm a bit sketchy on the details, but he was in Dio for a while, and then I think later he was in the Dave Lee Roth's band as well. Next up, we've got Dire Straits, and this is Money for Nothing. Not a big Dire Straits fan. I'm actually surprised I've got this in the collection, to be honest. And then next up, we've got Ian Gillan album. This is Naked Thunder. A decent solo album of Gillan's. This is a stamped promo copy as well, but not a bad solo album. Next up, we've got Iron Maiden, and this is No Prayer for the Dying. And this was, I think, the newest Iron Maiden album that I have on vinyl. I've never bought any of the reissues since getting back into things, so all of the originals I've got of the first few albums, the double live album, and this, and that's pretty much where my Maiden collection finishes for the time being, at least on vinyl. Next up, we've got Anthrax, Persistence of Time, which is a well thought of album in that sort of more thrashy vein. And then next up, we've got Glenn Hughes, and this is Play Me Out. Now, this is a 1990 release, I believe. Of course, the actual album, Play Me Out, did not come out then. The actual album came out in about 76, Play Me Out. This is a connoisseur re-release, a double album with Play Me Out and the Four on the Floor album that was released. Now, I'm not sure I've ever seen that Four in the Floor album in the wild, and it's a very sort of disco-y album. If you've heard songs like There Goes My Baby, it's real funky disco kind of thing. But I love Play Me Out, so one of my favourite albums, and that's the only way that I've got it on vinyl at the moment. Next up, we've got Megadeth, and this is Rust in Peace, a great album. Holy Wars, in particular, is a great track. That guitar riff at the start, a real good Megadeth album. More American melodic rock with House of Lords and Sahara. And then I was saying earlier about female-fronted bands or female artists. Not the biggest fan. Lita Ford wasn't bad at this point in time. This is Lita Ford Stiletto. Seems to be, I don't know, through over time a little bit of a troubled soul. I think struggled with, alcoholism. For a period. So she's career-wise. Dips in and out with the odd bit of good stuff, but not totally familiar with the rest of her discography. Talking about Iron Maiden earlier, we've got Bruce Dickinson solo album, Tattooed Millionaire. Then we've got, I was going to say a British band, but they're not, because Matti Alfonsetti, who's the singer, is Swedish, great singer, and probably massively underrated. Now, Jagged Edge's full album, this is a mini album called Trouble. Their main album, Fuel for Your Soul, I think it's called, is a great album. And I think that's been re-released on CD with this as bonus tracks on it. Next up, we've got Jimmy Barnes, Two Fires. And Jimmy Barnes is an Australian singer. Used to be in Cold Chisel, I think. And he's got quite a unique voice, quite a gravelly, distinctive, kind of shouty-ish voice, but really good stuff, some of his albums. And well worth trying some Jimmy Barnes if you've not heard of him. Next up, Black Sabbath. This is Tyr, however you want to say it, TYR. And this is another one of those albums, I think, from this period that sells for a decent chunk of change these days. These original copies, and this is absolutely mint, I think. Despite, being in storage all this time, it's in really good condition, and a great album with, the way it starts with Anno Mundi, and I think that's been recently remastered and re-released, hasn't it? Next up, Cry Wolf. I think another of these typical not really hair metal. This is kind of transitioned, I think, out of that hair metal period into this more Bon Jovi-ish, I want to say, kind of Americanized rock. Then we've got more of a stalwart of the classic rock era with Alice Cooper, almost coming back into favour around this period. I think he'd lost his way for a number of years and then seemed to come back into the limelight, I think, with Trash, the album. And this has got things like Feed My Frankenstein on this. Now, we talked about Dio earlier, and here we've got Craig Goldie's Ritual. So we mentioned that on the Dio album, we had Rowan Robertson had joined Dio, and that is because of the departure of Craig Goldie. And I'm not sure whether he went of his own accord or whatever, but I'm assuming this was to try and capitalize on his notoriety from being in Dio. on the Music for Nations label, but I don't recall it being the greatest of albums. Now, this is a great album. This is Mr. Big, another one of my favourite bands, if I'm honest. Just really like the combination. The Paul Gilbert's guitar work, Eric Martin's vocals, Billy Sheehan on bass, of course, and Pat Torpey, who sadly is no longer with us. It was a great guy. I had the fortune to meet him once when he was playing with Richie Kotzen and Stevie Sales on a small gig, and managed to hang out with those guys, and that was a really nice time. And this is a great album, especially Green Tinted 60s Mind, one of their all-time best songs for me, written by Paul Gilbert. Another good album of the time, Roll the Bones by Rush. These this period of Rush, I don't think gets enough love. I think these are really good albums around this time. This, Presto, Counterparts, all sort of good albums, and this one in particular, Roll the Bones, is a really good album, and again fetching a little bit of money these days, I think. Another of my favourite bands, It Bites. This is a Thank You and Good Night. This is their live album. This particular version is a double album, one album being a picture disc and the other one a regular album, and a great band, It Bites, if you've not tried them. And then we've got Extreme. This is 3 sides of the story. This is a double album. With Warheads, 7 Sundays, Tragic Comic, I think, was a single as well, a decent album. And then we have got FM with Aphrodisiac on the Music for Nations label as well. And that, I believe, was the last album that I bought of the 90s. At least that is the newest one in terms of years. So I think that is from 1993. And that pretty much concludes the albums that I have in my collection currently from that period, 1990 to 1993. So I imagine I'm missing lots of things from the vinyl. Doesn't mean I don't have them, but they'll be on CD probably, and they'll be in the CD collection at the other end of the room. And I may consider picking up some of those and getting them on vinyl at some point in the future, but we'll have to wait and see. So, what am I missing from that period? Any big albums that I should have picked up? Any in this collection that you wish you had or weren't aware of, perhaps? Do let me know with your comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, as always, give us a thumbs up, and do remember to subscribe if you want to catch more content in the future. But until next time, bye for now.